Everybody, welcome back to another allcounselors.com webinar. I'm with my friend and all counselor advisor, Steve Lackey. I'm going to let him introduce himself a little bit and tell us about his background, but I'm excited. This has been building for months because back in what was it, Steve? January, I think.
January, yeah.
We talked about this. We have so many clinicians inside of all counselors that are just starting to practice, and nobody better to talk about how to start one than Steve. He and his wife Lisa have been, how do you call yourself, partners in business and therapy?
Co-founders,
Co-partners,
co-partners, co-owners, if you will.
So you're in store for a treat. We're going to have a conversation today about starting your practice, things Steve's learned over the years, wants to pass on to you. If you have questions for Steve, right underneath our video here is a Q&A button, and that's where you can ask questions, and I'll be watching that as we go. So Steve, I say we just jump in here, but first, could you tell those of who are on the webinar who haven't heard of you or don't know who you are, could you give us a little bit of your background and what led you to today?
Sure. Thank you, Cory, and it's really good to be here with you. I've been looking forward to this since we met and talked about this, and we're here. So, yeah, my wife and I, Lisa, started our own private practice 18 years ago, actually. And at that time, we had no idea what the heck we were doing. We just knew, go to school, we knew what our passion was, we knew what we wanted to do, but we had no clue how to do it. And what we learned was that being in school teaches you how to be a counselor. It in no way teaches you how to run a business, how to start and develop it. So we literally just got in there, put our heads down and started really roughing it out, not understanding the need for a culture of support, a networking system, a mentor, tech support, and all of these kinds of things. So we basically did everything wrong. And thank goodness we're still here, we're still thriving, and we learned from each of those mistakes, which is how I was able to crystallize it into these 10 tips on how to start a private practice. But we were successful, and we were able to launch 8 individual clinicians to start their own private practices. We know that doing agency work versus private practice is a big deal, and a lot of people want to start. And so part of our passion was to get people into their passion. And so that's kind of what we did. And again, we made every mistake and we learned from them. And we just were a good team to console each other, to hug each other, say, it's okay, we messed up here. Let's get up and try it again. And that's what we did.
There's 2 things that stick out to me is one, when you're saying you made all the mistakes. When I was running I'm not a clinician, but when I was running my software business over 10 years, and we exited in 2018, when people would ask reflect back and look back, I said, if we wrote a book, it would be called Stumbling Successfully.
Right.
Not making mistakes that would just doom us,
Right.
fall flat on the ground, but enough where we weren't not running like this.
Right.
We were, and that's what stuck out to me.
Yeah. We I coined a little moniker for us, and it was bubblegum, grace, mercy, and spit. That's how we sort of held our practice, but also how we held our marriage together. Because being in business with a partner, it sounds ideal and altruistic and idealistic, but it's really challenging on a lot of levels. And so, yeah, we made those mistakes, and we've gained and profited from them, and have learned a lot.
I mean, that's the first thing. One is just creating and running and growing a successful business is tough. But second, also managing marriage, relationship. Lindsay and I, my wife, Lindsay, worked together for several parts of my past software business. And then now we work together, but I say she's definitely the boss. I'm just a helpful advisor when I can, but there is some navigation there. So that's part 2 down the road for us to talk about, get Lisa on here and talk to you and her and navigating business together.
Right.
Well, okay. So I want to jump in because you've got a wealth of experience to share. And I want to make some comments as we go too, because I know I've seen your outline, your list, and it's fantastic. And I think,
Sure.
this was the second thing I want to say.
Hmm.
Clinicians, you all spend so much time in academic, work and get these advanced degrees, then have to go through licensure and a good reason for all that. And then supervision and then
Hmm.
continuing education credits. And I'm not disputing any of that. I'm just saying it's a lot
It is.
to add all that. But there's no, here's how you run a practice. Here's how you run a
Hmm.
business,
Right.
training it all. And I'm glad we
None.
can help fill some of that gap for our clinicians looking to do that. So, okay, that was my second observation. Now I just want to say, what's the first thing you want to talk about? Tip you want to share?
What I like to do, Corey, because I love talking to you and I like how we kind of pull from each other, as I've always said. But what I want to make sure I do on the front end is get the nuts and bolts information to emerging and new clinicians.
Mhm.
Things that we wish we knew how to do on the front end, being in business 18 to 20 years. I just want to go right into that. And the first thing is to maintain hope, confidence, and belief in yourself by having a community. Real
Mhm.
important to become a part of a network of people that are active in your area of interest. And you want to marry yourself with organizations that will continue to stretch you and help you grow. Example, we're members of the International Institute of Trauma and Addictions Professionals. We're also members of the Association for Group and Psychotherapy Association. We're members of the CSAT community, which is the certification for sex addiction therapy, as well as multiple addictions therapy. Then we're also members of the Society for the Advancement of Sexual Health. So I'm spouting these acronyms, these organizations, but it took years to learn that we needed to be a part of those. And thankfully, we had people to help kind of direct us there when we, and what I failed to mention initially was we worked at a private practice together, Lisa and I, with a different private practice for 5 years, which is where we cut our teeth and learned about our need to be in community. So that's one. And the second is to become properly licensed,
Mm.
to know what licensure requirements for whatever state that you're in. You want to make sure that you are properly licensed. Three is to get or find your national provider number, and that's the NPI number. And that number identifies you to your healthcare partners, including all payers. And they comply with HIPAA standards and transactions. So there's a lot of anonymity and the protections in that regard, but you need an NPI number. And then get malpractice insurance. Real important. Make sure it covers you and your business if it's a corporation, and you'll want at least $1 million to $3 million coverage. Give you an example real quickly, if I can, about a breach that we had. We had a new intern. And so again, we had a demographic of sex addiction, we had betrayal partners, we had trauma survivors, and all of that. The intern inadvertently did an email blast to everyone in our practice. So he literally blew the cover to the trauma and partners of betrayal and exposed our clients that were recovering sex addicts. And boy, oh boy, the phone started ringing, the lawyers were calling, and we were scared to death, actually. We thought we were going to lose the business, we were going to go bankrupt, but it didn't happen. We had insurance. It was an honest mistake, and we were able to rectify that with each client, all
Mhm.
150 or 200 of them. So make sure you get that
Yeah.
malpractice insurance.
Yeah.
And then you want to get your employee identification number. So that will be used instead of your social security number. It's the thing you definitely want to have. And
It's like the social security number for your business
for
entity,
business.
which gives you
Absolutely.
another set of liability, potential liability protection, and also
Exactly.
puts things in neat buckets, expenses, your business expenses, personal stuff, and keeps separation between those,
Right.
which I'm glad you
Absolutely.
mentioned the EIN number.
Yeah. And it also identifies you as a business that's in good standing with the state always. So healthcare providers, payers, people will recognize through your EIN number that you're in good standing. So that's real important. Also, if you want to take insurance, start that process as soon as possible. As soon as possible. Real important. We are a fee for service. Since the very beginning, we don't accept insurance. And there's a lot of pros and cons to that. The pros to having and sitting on an insurance panel and having insurance is that you can appeal to a broader audience, a larger demographic, and get more clients. Some of the cons to that is what insurance companies, insurance panels are willing to pay for services. So you may charge $150 an hour, but they're only paying $60 an hour. So you have to be mindful that that represents sort of a sliding scale kind of scenario. So we've been fee for service since the beginning. And Cory, I'm real fortunate to be able to say that it's worked for us, but it's also scary because there's cancellations, there's acts of God, there's health issues, and people don't come or show up or call, then you don't get paid and then you can't eat. So it's a compromise.
We'll need to come back at some point because I
Mhm.
have worked primarily with independent professionals in a completely different profession, freelance web designers. And when a client doesn't show up or time is your money, and there's
Right.
expectations and boundaries that you got to put around those type of things, because even though you all are doing such amazing work in the world, you also deserve rightly to be paid for people to
Yeah,
show up and to pay you promptly. So I
absolutely.
appreciate that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And also make sure you want to have a physical virtual space that's HIPAA compliant. Real important to find out that your space that you're running or leasing from is HIPAA compliant.
And you're talking specifically the office space.
Yes,
Is that right?
yes,
Yeah. Okay.
yes. Although everyone's migrated to telehealth, and 95% of our business transferred to telehealth with us, and all of our clinicians that work for us. So we were real fortunate with that as well. Have an email plan, a HIPAA compliant email. You may have to pay a small fee, but it's real important to have a practice management system and to automate as much as possible. And all of your features within your practice will be within that management system. And that includes, and I'm sure some of you have heard of this, simple practice and therapy notes. They separate out, they collate, they correlate, and they put things in order for you in such a way that when Lisa and I first started, we were doing all the paperwork. We had intake forms on clipboards and I mean assessment sheets out of the lobby. It was really difficult until we joined Simple Practice and learned about therapy notes. Also, you want to be aware of informed consent because informed consent gives you the opportunity to know what treatment you're getting, know what services ahead of time, and gives you the option to accept and or decline. So it's important that you sign and have your client sign the informed consent. And it also offers you an opportunity for service and health providers to communicate with each other through a release of information, as well as your informed consent. Um, Real quick, and I'm gonna go through this real fast, Cory, so we can get to our discussion. Release of information, uh, super bills. A super bill are just the bills that health providers receive for reimbursement, and that's done monthly. So that's where the client submits to their insurance company the super bill that has codes, diagnostic codes from the DSM and that sort of thing, to make sure we're in compliance. Intake paperwork, or now everything is online. Written practice policies, assessment forms that need to be completed during a session for your clients. Have a way to keep track of your money, because we've had a lot of money hanging out there because we were submitting and charging all the time, because that doesn't become the most important thing, is helping the client. And sometimes over weeks you forget to charge. So make sure you have a way to keep track of your money. Have a telephone script for your voicemail and for your new client calls. Make sure that you have that up to date and ready. So now you're ready to see your first client. Those were the nuts and bolts. Now you're ready to see your first client. So you're going to open a business bank account with lower fees and promotions. You're going to decide with an accountant or lawyer which kind of corporation you'll be. If it's an S corp, which decreases the amount you will pay in taxes, and your accountant will set all of this up for you and guide you. Compare practice management systems with reviews from colleagues. Get feedback from other clinicians on what they do and how they do their management system. Choose your business cards. And then the best is either build a website or outsource this. And what I'm going to do is welcome everyone to become a member of the All Counseling, All Recovery, and All Counseling family. We're talking state-of-the-art technical supports that we had no idea about. We had no idea how to do webinars, podcasts, ebooks, and have coaching. But the idea is you want to be found everywhere. And that's what All Counselors does. We make sure that you're exposed on a lot of different platforms. And so you want to look that up, because that will offer you maximum exposure, maximum traffic, and maximum support that will be there with you 24 hours a day, as long as you need that support. And then lastly, if you're establishing a sliding scale plan, be clear about the parameters of that. So for instance, with interns, we can't charge clients the full fee because they're being seen by someone who is still trying to get their licensure and they're being supervised. So we can't charge clients, the full fee. So just be aware of the parameters of that. And so there you have it. I hope you got a lot out of those nuts and bolts. Those were the things we didn't know, we had to learn, and we had to do ourselves.
That's a lot drinking from the fire hose. And if you paid attention and you wrote down 3 things, you're
Right.
way ahead of the score as someone who's started a business too, not a therapy business. You covered some really key things. I want to scroll back for a second and emphasize some things. Everything you said is amazing. But the first is a community of people. That's something I didn't have first couple of years of my business. And I found a local group that I met with. They became my best friends over 10 years. My success and my struggles, I got to share with them, and vice versa. And I can't underscore what you said there. And I'm so glad you led with it, is that so much being a business owner, entrepreneur is like living on an island by yourself.
Yeah,
My parents have had jobs their whole lives, haven't started businesses. You're going to be in this different thing, even though you're thinking therapist, I'm a therapist, I'm a clinician, counselor, but you're a business owner.
All right.
And that sets you apart from the majority of the population. And it's not easy. So that, that's having a group of people, like-minded people on the same path to meet with regularly. I appreciate you said that first and foremost.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to say too is you said this close to the end, the 2 people besides if you're in a serious relationship, the 2 allies you need are a lawyer and an accountant.
Absolutely.
And I'm so glad you said that too, because as you're preparing your practice, there's a tendency to try to go save as much money as you can, do it all yourself. You will be better off. And I bet you Steve's got the same thing. Find experts that own those areas. For an accountant, you're going to talk to every month. That's going to help you with things. I mean, for instance, tax day was yesterday. I was calling mine. For the last 5-6 years, I've been doing extensions. I bet you
Right.
have too. And
Yeah.
like, and because that's part of running a business is just,
Right.
trying to do all these things at once. Get a good CPA. Second is have an ongoing relationship with a lawyer.
Mhm.
When stuff
Mhm.
happens like this, I mean, if I don't know if you had a lawyer at the time, Steve, but being able to just go, uh-oh, this just happened. What do I do? And
Right.
having somebody, if not even on retainer, just a good relationship that you can call and ask for, questions are so vital when you're
I,
starting, growing a business.
yeah, I
So
think
thank
it's
you for those
well,
3 things.
you're welcome. I strongly reiterate that because remember I talked about that email breach. That's when we got a lawyer. We got one on retainer, and it's just worth the money. I can't tell you how much money we spent unnecessarily without the advice of a good attorney as well as an accountant. So yeah,
Yeah.
I implore you to do that. Real
So
important.
I want to get to your 10 real
Mhm.
quick. Melanie had a question. I have an attorney. I still need to get my materials together. I'm requesting they review my paperwork and business foundation. What would you suggest I have the attorney review for my practice? And I wanted to say for my 2 cents, even though you can probably likely in your state create your foundation, um, of the start, filing with your Secretary of State, most likely, at least in Oklahoma
Mhm.
here,
Mhm.
and that will help you trigger your EIN, which is the IRS, by the way, in the United States. For something like this, I would suggest, and I'm not a lawyer, to have the lawyer do that for you. It would probably cost, I'm going to guess, between $600 to $1,500 to do that with an attorney. But that way, they've done everything and it's all baked in from the beginning to know industries like yours that are highly licensed and certified. And there's, you want to get all those things, dot the I's and cross the
Sure.
T's. Steve, I don't know
Absolutely.
what you think about that, but before we go on, I want to give you the chance to.
Respond. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what we found out was that there are attorneys that specifically address or specialize in private practices and counseling centers. So you want to make sure you know who those are and introduce yourself to one because they specifically deal with everything that you asked in your question. They go and they sort of help frame and put some architecture around your practice that will protect you but also have you thinking about growth and thinking about selling and thinking about a lot of types of things. And so it's real important to get an attorney that knows the clinical world.
Okay, I know if we don't keep going, we're gonna run out of time, and you've got a lot to share. So this
Yeah,
might
I
already, I
get.
can already predict, Steve, that
Yeah,
we're gonna have part 2 of this.
I know. I know because I have like 5 pages here that I'm so anxious to get to new clinicians. That's real important. And real quickly, if I can go through this
Yes.
again, but also I want you all to understand that to prioritize during your own work. Prioritize. Do not let down your need for self-care. Real important. We learned this early in the game. My wife and I would both be burned out, stopped exercising, stopped going on walks, and we come home, we bring the office here, and we're doing work, and we never really continued to develop this deep self-care practice. And it needs to be that, whether it's therapy, whether it's meditation, whether it's a consult group, or whether it's just an accountability group. Real important to for your spiritual development, your emotional development. Exercising, I at my age I've gone back to the gym the last couple of months since COVID, and then also to work on your business and not in your business. It's one thing to know how to be a counselor. It's another thing to know exactly where you want to go with your practice. Do you want to continue the daily, hourly grind? Do you want to hire additional staff? Do you want to train them? Those are things to really to consider, not just working in your business, but work on the business, because you want to grow it to be able to transfer it, sell it, or whatever else you want to do. But we were able to launch, as I said earlier, 8 clinicians into our own private practice. And so that became a thing for us to bring qualified people on board as interns, to teach them as we were taught. And then, so that's working on. So now we have this amazing support system of people we've launched. So they in turn become a great referral source and vice versa. So that's really important. And then you want to tame the inner critic and try to eliminate the shoulds and embrace adjustment and change. Embrace it like it's supposed to happen. Because when you try to resist, you're gonna fall down a rabbit hole that you don't want to go down. And it's a term that I coined, Cory, and it's called X scary. When you don't embrace change and adjustment, it's X scary. It's exciting to start the practice, but it's also scary. And it's okay to walk through that fear, because that's where your power is. That's where your power is going to come from. You embracing that fear and walking through. So again, I have a ton. I know we need a part 2. So
Yeah.
I don't know how long or how far you want me to go, but I have a ton here still.
Yeah, let's start. So let's start with your first big tip, and let's see how far we can get in the next 30 minutes.
Oh, okay. Great. So here's the other thing. Learn how to take toxic showers and understand that your autonomic nervous system, know what the messaging is of your autonomic nervous system. We know it clinically as fight, flight, freeze, faint, or collapse, but you need to know what's messaging for you. For instance, there's terms that we know called countertransference and transference. You have to know what triggers you and know the things that are limitations for you. Example, we didn't know we were going to be dealing primarily with sex addiction and codependency. And so first of the few clients that we had were offending behavior. We didn't know. I was taking on all comers, but what I didn't know is when I started hearing about underage kids and trading cards and porn for underage, it really hit me really hard. And I realized that's a limitation for me. So we learned of a group called the Center for Contextual Change that deals specifically with offenders. So during the assessment part, it's really important to find out what your limitations are and to know your demographic. Know who it is you want to be your client. Real important. If you want to do trauma, addiction, be specific about what that is. And you want to learn and grow, whether it's EMDR, somatic experiencing. There's so many different types of modalities that are available. I chase and follow neuroscience. I love it. I like to know how the brain works. I like to know, that's the one thing, and a lot of you will agree, that in school, we study everything but the thing that's wrong with you. We study everything about it, but not it. So that's important. And then another thing is, what's your passion? You know, what's the reason you're really doing this? Is it to help others? Is it to make money? Or is it to create a well world? Is it to create a well world? That's kind of our marching orders at all counselors. We want to make a well world. How do you do that? You do it one person at a time, but it has to begin with yourself, your own healing, your own recovery, your own system of support for health for yourself.
I'm glad you said this, because as I've worked more closely with clinicians, I've heard that doing your own work, you got to do your own work so well. I've adopted it for my own self. I've been in therapy for 6 years now, and on a very regular basis. And the doing your work, I love that. But to say for clinicians, I mean, I want you to do as a potential client, I want you to do your own work.
Right.
I'm doing my tough work right now at 45, and I hope you're doing your own work. And I love that phrase so much. We put it
Right.
on a mug.
Yeah. And here's the second part to it. Every great therapist has a therapist. I
Mm,
went to so many people, and even in my own recovery journey for decades, going through clinicians, psychologists that just had the credentials, but they hadn't done the work. They had no idea. There were no cultural considerations. They were absent of the experiential part of this. And so it's important to have, for me, and Lisa and I, and we share this one, make sure you have a therapist that has a therapist
yep.
because they need to continue to do the work no matter what.
That'd be a
Identify.
great question for
Oh,
us to ask on our all counseling. We've got this in play for our directory is, do you have a counselor?
right,
Do you have your
absolutely,
own therapist? That'd be a great question to ask. I appreciate it.
absolutely.
I want to quick, every great therapist has a therapist. I love that.
Every great therapist has a therapist, and the key word is every great. So you don't want to just be good and mundane. You want to stick out.
Mm.
What is it that will have you stand out? Where people will refer you word of mouth within their family, their community, their business environment, and we get a lot of referrals from family members. What sticks out? Well, we all do our own work. All of our clinicians, Corey, do their own work. They have therapists. It's not a mandate, but it's something that's for us in our culture that we require that everyone has a therapist. Find out, as I said earlier, real briefly, is what led you to pursue this? Was it your family of origin? Was it your personal history? Or did all roads lead to you going to school to become a clinician? Um, I have a corporate history. I was in the corporate arena for 20 plus years. I worked in state government as a bureaucrat. And then got the social service bug. I just happened to take this part time job working for misplaced, displaced workers for ITT, the now gone International Telegraph, the telegram service, and teaching them communication skills, interviewing skills, and the like. And then I worked for Family Focus, a group that for at-risk youth, where I would do case management at schools. And then I worked for I Have a Dream, which is a mentoring and tutorial program to follow kids from junior high through undergraduate school. And then for the state, I worked as a non-custodial parent program manager that rolled out non-custodial services throughout the state. Well, all of those experiences, one, led me to know I have a passion for helping people. People have come to me, family members and friends have shared secrets all of my life, but I really got the bug in those environments. And I said, you know what? Maybe I need to follow Lisa back to school and become this counselor. And I'm so glad that I did. And also, last two. One is sometimes you got to walk around the world just across the street. In other words, you will learn what not to do. So the nuts and bolts that I've given you will help you all to cut across the field, so to speak, so you don't have to make the same mistakes or hinder yourself or throw roadblocks or self-inflicted wounds. You don't have to do that. You don't have to walk around the world to cross the street, but we did. Um, so learn what not to do. Learn what you're not capable of doing, what you're not interested in doing, and what's not helpful for others, but also helpful for you in your practice. And then lastly, and it goes along with self-care, have healthy outlets to de-stress and enjoy your life outside of the business. And I will reiterate this in closing is all counselors, all recovery, all counseling is the one-stop shop that will help you de-stress, take away a lot of struggle and trauma, will help mentor and support you technically That's huge importance. If you're open for podcasts, webinars, ebooks, and the like, you want to make sure you have a state-of-the-art technical team that will show you how to do that, will design a website for you and help manage it so you don't have to do that. I can't even tell you how many thousands of dollars I've spent having guys that had website design as a hobby, and we didn't have a professional. So that's a bonus, is to become part of the family.
Well, thank you for that, Steve. And all of this, that was drinking from a fire hose.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you have questions for Steve, please post those in the Q&A button right below. But in the meantime, while you're posting your own questions for Steve, I have a couple for you. How do you get your first clients? You came from a private practice, but Lindsay, my wife's going through this right now. She just graduated in December, now needs to get her date for her exam. And, it's a big question is, I want to do this out, and she has a long road with supervision and all that, but like, I'm ready to go move from agency work into my own private practice. How would you recommend those listening now start to find and identify and get the word out about their practice?
Yeah. One is what we offer is the digital marketing, which is huge. But in that culture of support that I talked about early on is where others will become aware of what your strengths are and what your interests are and what your practice is all about. So it's through networking, collaboration, and just putting yourself out there. Like, as I said, be found everywhere. So once your name, your practice is out there, people will know that you're available to see clients. But what we did is we went to every symposium, every seminar, every group function, even in different states, and introduced ourselves to people and made sure that our name and our practice got out there. So again, it's the networking that's the most important to get your first client.
When you talk about referrals too, and then networking, I think about like my wife and her just finished her degree is staying in touch with colleagues, people that are already in agencies, professors. She has had a great mentor professor that she's continued to stay involved in. And then as I've gotten deeper, you've helped me understand a ton of things about the industry, about this particular profession. Supervising clinicians. My assumption is the one that's not the therapist here is supervising therapists do that because they want to help people even more than just their clients. And so that's got to be a great wealth of information. But you mentioned way back in our conversation about business cards. It's just having something when people saying, what do you do? I'm a counselor. I'm a therapist. I'm a clinician.
Yeah, definitely you want. And now there's digital cards. So I have, as you and Ani both know, I have a box full of business cards, which are very helpful, but you also want to combine that with digital cards so that you can email and send to as many people as you possibly can. Because of COVID, we're not meeting like we normally do. So make sure cards are real important. People have called me that said, I got your card 4 years ago. I had a guy just called me a few days ago. You gave me your card 4 years ago. So you never know. People remember when you share with them, when you give your information, they keep it. And when they get in trouble or they need some help, they'll call.
Well, as I've talked about my personal publicly things that happened well in the past that I've healed from, when I share my own mental health story, people will often say, the first question is, how do I find a therapist? And so my therapist here in Oklahoma City had on his desk or, right where you walk in, business cards. And that was easy. I took 2 or 3 because all the time people ask me, and having that ready resource with, like you said earlier, attached to a website and a phone number and an email that they can contact you or easily forward your information is absolutely vital. We talk a lot about this at allcounselors.com. Just the be found everywhere strategy you're talking about where website, phone number, email address, all linking back to you is the best way to get your word out. And then we also talk about listings. I mean, it's further down the priority scale for me when I make recommendations, but having your profile on things like therapyden.com, who has free listings, Psychology Today is paid, but
Yeah.
you know, those are great ways to be found everywhere for sure.
Yeah. And I know for me, Cory, and I've shared, with you and Ani, my recovery story that, so how I found the therapist was because of my specific issue. And partly it was grief and loss of losing 5 members of my immediate family. I went around for years not knowing that trauma was stuck down there. And I was in the corporate arena. I had my tie untied. I had a cigarette in my mouth at the time. I had the phone and I was sweating. And I just started crying all of a sudden. Well, I found a grief and loss therapist. And she said, Steve, it's been 12 years and you haven't grieved. And that really led me to this long journey of healing around grief and loss, which still requires check-in and maintenance because, as you all know as clinicians, the body remembers every experience. It remembers. So you want to always be in the process of healing more and more, going deeper and deeper. And so I just looked up those that deal with grief and loss, those that dealt with specific addictions, those that dealt with the trauma of grief and loss. But any trauma story that you have, find trauma specialists. Everyone can't treat trauma as thoroughly and as effectively as you want it to do, as you want them or need them to do.
So I mentioned Therapy Den. I put that therapyden.com. I put that in the chat, and also make sure you're in our free membership that Steve alluded to. Appreciate that. Free community membership allows you to get in and get access to all this stuff. And then we're also working on a therapist directory too of our own to help you get more light and connect you with those that are hurting. So someone asked, is there value? You mentioned conferences. I love that because I've seen that in industry that transfers conferences and networking groups. But is there value in joining networking groups that require a membership fee or that requires you to bring referrals to other businesses such as BNI International? And by the way, I just heard about this like 2 weeks ago. It's a group that you would only have one counselor per networking group, but I would be required to bring a referral to other members as well each week. Or are there others that are free?
Yeah, that one I'm not as familiar with, to be honest. But anything that requires you to bring a client a referral, I'm not sure about. But there are, like for AGPA, for instance, I talked about American Group Psychotherapy Association. There's a minimal fee to participate. But what we did was over a year or two, we put in a proposal to present. And so we presented, and as a result of us presenting, we got a membership for free. So there's other organizations that you can join that are free, just starting out. You don't want to get too top heavy with paying membership fees and dues. And if you do, you want it to be at the minimal cost for the one-stop shop that I talked about with all counselors in all recovery and all counseling, because it's not going to cost you an arm and a leg, but it's a one-stop shop. So be real aware of what's being offered and is it cost effective for you.
That's great information. And so I appreciate they said be careful of the overhead of a lot of fees. I appreciate that so much. As I've thought, now I do marketing and technology, but so when I think about how to best position therapists, there's got to be free groups in your area, like let's say BNI for instance, but one that doesn't charge. Like there's Rotary in Oklahoma City that's very renowned. A way to, now you have to have a friend or whatever, but I like if you have time, you being a part of those things as a clinician, budding clinician specifically, because you're swimming in circles that aren't just clinicians.
Right.
Now for support, I think you need clinicians, but you're also in these that you're giving back. So find things that are interesting to you. And it's a great way to bring your business card, and now we're still in the pandemic here. So I know in-person stuff is a little bit harder, but
Yeah.
if you have more time than money, be 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 known. You can start building these relationships. I know I've known Steve for almost a year now, and I know one thing you always get from Steve when you leave him is he is all about building relationships with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that is such currency and capital for your business, for your career. And there's a reason why Steve talks about that first and foremost is I want to build long-term relationships, because the ripple effect from that. I'm here today, Steve, and you know my story because of people. I can't
Yeah.
claim all my success
Absolutely.
um,
Right.
at all. Born on third base. I don't think I hit
Mhm.
a home run. I know I was born on third base, but my relationships
Yeah.
from past employers,
Mhm.
leaving every place I ever worked at better than I left when I got there,
Mhm.
and being good quality person in the world
Sure.
has such big benefits.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What I didn't know either, Corey, and by all means, what we've shared today, what I've shared is by no means exhaustive or a panacea. But alluding to what you just talked about, we didn't know that becoming a part of your local chamber of commerce and a part of the Evanston Department of Health and Mental Health Services. So we've reached out and created relationships across the board with the mayor's office, who's about to do a roundtable around race, and so the Chamber of Commerce, the school system here, Northwestern University, we're known up there. So the referral sources there are amazing. Evanston Township High School. And what I didn't say is that we have two offices. One is downtown Chicago on Michigan Avenue, and another office is here in Evanston, which is a suburb north of Chicago. And so, whatever business or office you may be in, look at the legend as well and know who's the psychiatrist, psychologist, the therapist, clinicians that are there, the LCSWs, and develop relationship. Relationship building is the social equity for your growth.
That's so good. Well, you just named I mean, when you're talking about University of Chicago, be found everywhere. So
Right.
think about your passions, your interests in life. Have your business cards in your pocket at all times. People, it's the first little chit chat question people ask is, "What do you do for a living?"
Hmm.
You'll have your little one liner if you don't want to just say,
Right.
"Well, I'm a psychotherapist" or whatever. But that's perfect, and you have the cards. Oh, so and so needs. Just ask me about this.
Right.
One thing I was thinking about too, Steve, is
Hmm.
as so many people over the years, and you and I are working on a project together with this, have asked me, how do you find a therapist? And I go, well, my therapist, it's been almost 10 years ago, 11 years ago now, actually came to me as referral, by the way, by my lawyer. But
Yeah.
as I started to, get asked this question more often, I started going, there's not a lot of resources for this.
Hmm.
And one thing I always go back to is your primary care physician. So on the flip side
Yeah.
for a therapist is great relationships with doctors in the area
Right.
that
Absolutely.
need an outlet to say, okay, this is not just something we need to prescribe medicine to, something you need to also be talking with a trained licensed practitioner.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, Lisa, I'm real fortunate. My wife is, she's the social butterfly. She's the one that gets out there, literally recommended and referred therapists to me, as we have with other family members and friends. And so it's just important, as we've said over and over, is building relationships and allowing yourself to be known, to be found, to be known, and express your needs. Don't hide, isolate, or think that it's something wrong with needing to get help or having support, because if I didn't, I wouldn't be here. We wouldn't still be married. We just celebrated 30 years in December. And trust me, that was a long journey. But we both do our work and we both get help. We both refer out. People know us, they know the recovery process that we're both in, but also um, now comes the trust. Now people can trust because they know you've been vulnerable and transparent about your life. And people are always willing to help when you're honest and above board and transparent. Oh, I lost your audio.
That's me. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
I try to mute when I'm not talking. But hey, all, we have another 10 minutes here with Steve. I want to make sure you get your questions answered by this veteran therapist. And by the way, congratulations on you and Lisa's 30 years. That's
Thank you.
extremely impressive.
Thank you. More than you know. It's more impressive than that.
So true.
Yeah.
Well, if you have questions for Steve with the last couple of minutes we have here, be sure to post those. Anything he's covered, and he's covered a lot. The recording will be up on allcounselors.com shortly afterwards. Steve's here and you heard his heart. He's trying to help you learn from his own mistakes, but also I'd say the wealth of experiences he's had building a practice and a treatment center. So I asked a survey real quick in the chat too, Steve. Quick survey. Do you have a website?
Mm-hmm.
Website is your virtual business card.
That's right.
So if you could post that there. How can I find okay, Keisha asked how can I find a mentor? I'm an LPC.
Again, again, the networking, the organizations, but also all counselors, all recovery. I can't say it enough. All counseling, be aware that there's mentorship opportunities there. But any association that you connect with, you will find someone, you'll hear someone speak or moderate or facilitate a session, and you'll be drawn to them. And you could just go up and ask, would you mind in the interim while I get my licensure, mentor me? It's as simple as just asking someone, but you got to be seen and known to do that. So any agency, any organization, any related collaboration that you could find, you'll find a mentor in those environments. You really will.
I like how you gave the examples of the associations and different things from certifications and things like that. I know we talked a little bit about brain spotting, for instance, and you know, specifically if there's somebody not in your direct area, we have Zoom, we have the internet to be able to do that. And I found by and large, I don't know about your experience, but other successful business owners and entrepreneurs, when you ask, I'm just starting out, can you give me some tips like you're doing here, are so gracious and generous with their time.
It is. And, you know, and I think we spoke about this a while ago about an upcoming opportunity, was a panel or a summit. Remember, we talked about doing a summit. So there's going to be some really exciting things coming on board as we grow and go. But in the interim, the associations, and I mentioned the CSAT community, I mentioned, you know, some of the certifications that Lisa and I have. She's a part of MDRIA. She's a EMDR trained, second level trained. She's a somatic trained. She does Reiki. She does a lot of different things, and she has to. So we're both in session all the time in our marriage. We're checking each other out, but we share a ton of information. She exposes me to so many people and so many things, and vice versa. I share a lot with her, and which has led her to grow in certain areas as well. So exhaust your list, exhaust your community, but above all, be a part of one. Really important.
Excellent. All right. If you have any questions for Steve Lackey, veteran clinician, practice and treatment center builder, visionary, let us know in the Q&A there. So I think there's some excellent stuff. You can go back. The recording will be at allcounselors.com. You gave a fire hose of information, Steve.
Yeah, I
know, of good
that
stuff.
Yeah.
I would, in our parting thought, I always try to say, okay, this is a lot. Now you covered your bases, everybody. If you listen to what Steve shared with you, this is gold for you. You could have the tendency, though, if you're like me, to get overwhelmed. Start one baby step at a time. Layer these things in. If you have a full-time job, and I want to hear your advice and coaching, Steve. You have a full-time job. You can work on these on, piece by piece as you go. Get your LLC, limited liability corporation or company, depending on your state. Get your website going on the side. Make sure you're doing right and not jeopardizing your job. But you can layer in these pieces as you work in an agency or full-time job. But that was just my thought, Steve. In our parting comments here, what advice would you have for those of in attendance today?
Is to not let anything stop what you've dreamt, what's in your heart, what's a passion of yours, and what you want to contribute to this planet with the time that you have here. Don't let anything impede your pursuing that. Exhaust all avenues, all exposures, all collaborations, everything you possibly can, but don't ever stop. I don't care what the setback may look like, because we've overcome so much. I know that you will not have to deal with all of the things that we did on the front end. So do not let anything get in the way of what your passion is and what's in your heart and what it is you want to do to help others on this planet to create a world. It's really, really important.
So I want to tell you real quick in the closing minutes, unless anyone has a question, but something we're working on with Steve is a whole series of webinars like this on how to be an inclusive therapist. And I'm so eager to get to that series. One, as just a student and to listen. Steve and Lisa taught me so much about race and helped me look in the mirror and go, I have my work to do for sure. And they've been so incredibly gracious about that. But with Steve's great direction and assistance, we've got a list of things, and now we're touching base with some key people, including Lisa and Steve, to come in. You're not going to want to miss that at allcounselors.com, by the way. So if you want to be a more inclusive therapist, stay tuned. We're going to be rolling out some things in the very near future, and I'm pumped about that, Steve, to be working with you on that project.
I am too. I really am. Thank you.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today. And I know you can't see it, I don't think, Steve, but everybody's just going, thanks for a great webinar as always.
I can see that.
You'll have to go back and replay everything because what you're giving, and I'm sorry if I rushed you. I didn't mean to. I just wanted to make sure we had appropriate time for everything. You're going to need to go back and watch the replay. Steve gave you some gold and just start making check marks on things. I made progress on this. I made progress on that.
Yeah.
Steve, my friend, thank you so much for today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Hope that was helpful.
Absolutely. All right. We'll see you back at allcounselors.com on the next time. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.